So through the familiar Bible stories of Daniel in the lion's den and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the burning fiery furnace, Daniel's interpreting of dreams, God granted favor to his servants who were exiled in this foreign land. They were taken captive from Judah and brought to Babylon. Even though this was a time of discipline and punishment for the children of Israel, God did not forsake them during this time. Well, then our study moved on to the second half of Daniel, which is the prophecy section of the book. And chapter 7 began with Daniel having a dream of 4 strange beasts coming up out of the sea. These beasts were kingdoms that corresponded to the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream that we studied when we were in chapter 2. So the kingdoms were Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Nebuchadnezzar's dream portrayed these kingdoms from a human perspective. They were shiny, they were beautiful, they were strong metals. In Daniel's dream, we see God's perspective of these human empires. They're ruthless animals, they devour their enemies, they're temporary, they're self-glorifying, and they're morally corrupt. In each dream, the earthly kingdoms are overcome by God in the end. And then last week we saw the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man enter into Daniel's dream. The Ancient of Days speaks of God's eternity. The vision of him with white hair and beard speaks of his purity. The fire that flowed from the throne speaks of judgment. The court's in session, the king is on the throne, and justice is coming. Daniel then saw the Son of Man coming in the clouds. This is a clear reference to Jesus. The scriptures tell us in many places that Jesus will return in the clouds. In fact, the Son of Man was Jesus' favorite title for himself. He used it frequently. We are to be praying every day that God's kingdom would come and come soon. We see that in what is known as the Lord's Prayer. After the introductory praise of God, the first thing that is prayed is, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." Well, then, as a reminder of our timeline here, the first 6 books in Daniel, first 6 chapters in Daniel occurred in chronological order from the time that Daniel and his friends were taken captive in Babylon around 605 BC, and they run through the lion's den in chapter 6, which takes place after the Persians have taken over from Babylon, after the fall of Babylon. And then we saw that as we come into chapter 7, we back up in our timeline, so we're no longer in chronological order. And we talked about some of the reasons for that because of the way that the book is written in chapters 2 through 7 kind of form that pattern that we talked about. So here we have the vision of the 4 beasts. So that's kind of where we are in that timeline. And in fact, it says it's the first year of Belshazzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is dead. Some of his sons have taken over and reigned for short periods. And now his son-in-law, Nabopolassar, is reigning, and Belshazzar is also like a co-regent. He's the son of Nabopolassar, and he's been elevated to kind of be the co-regent in Babylon while Nabopolassar is out doing the kind of things he wants to do. He has other interests to pursue. All right, so as we read through this, we're going to see now, after Daniel's had this dream, we've talked about it a little bit, but now he's going to speak to an interpreter and have somebody interpret the dream for him, and so that's where we are. So as I read through Daniel 15 through 28, if you just jot down any important words or notes, we'll list those as our overview for tonight. Daniel 7, verse 15. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. Okay, so what words jumped out at you there?
Saints.
Mm-hmm.
Dominion and kingdom. Forever, ever, and everlasting.
Yeah.
The Most High.
10 horns, 10 kings.
Yeah.
I desire to know the truth.
Ah. Yeah.
Times and half a time. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, this is a good overview for where we're going. Okay. Well, verse 15 gives us some insight into how troubled Daniel was after seeing his dream and his visions. The ESV says that Daniel's spirit was anxious. The Aramaic word conveys the picture of one who is pierced. So we might say that Daniel was pierced in his spirit. His spirit was alarmed. What has him so distressed? Well, the whole dream was a lot to take in, obviously, but the foreboding appearance of that little horn was a particular concern. We can be grateful that Daniel was not content with just seeing this incredible vision, but he desired to know more. So we see that he keeps on looking. He wants to know the truth about what he is seeing. We too should ask God for wisdom in comprehending his word. Somebody has James 1:5.
If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given.
Daniel sets a good example for us here in his seeking, so we too should seek for that wisdom as well. Now, at the same time, we balance that with the understanding that God is not obligated to reveal all of his hidden secrets to us. We see that in Deuteronomy 29:29.
The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of his law.
So God has revealed some things to us, and we've said this as we study this prophecy. It says God sharing his secrets with us, his children. Well, Daniel then approaches one of the thousands that are gathered around the throne here, and he continues looking. He wants to understand what he is seeing, and so now he asks someone near him for help. It seems that this is an angelic interpreter who has the insight into the scene that is unfolding before him. We see this same pattern in Revelation where John speaks with the angels. Somebody has Revelation 21, verse 9.
Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of seven last plagues, and spoke to me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb.
So as some of these visions and dreams take place, we humans need a little help sometimes in understanding this. So God provides an interpreter there for us sometimes. Well, the angel quickly grants Daniel's request for help and some understanding there. So the angel confirms that the four beasts represented four kings. And the mention of kings is almost always identified with kingdoms, so we've talked about them in that way. The angel lumps them together as though they were a unit in both Nebuchadnezzar's dream and here again in Daniel's dream. These kingdoms are destroyed at the same time, so there's one sense in which they represent earthly kingdoms in general. The angel changes the metaphor slightly here when he says the kingdoms arose from the earth. Daniel said earlier that they had come out of the sea, but the same thing, they're coming from the earth. They're not coming from heaven. So the point is that they're human, they're earthly kingdoms, and they stand in contrast to that kingdom that is to come that we'll read about here a little later. Well, we went over these kingdoms in an earlier lesson, and we'll be doing them again coming up because this idea is repeated again in future chapters. But for now, we'll just say they were Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. These were the major empires that are going to rule the world during this time of the Gentiles that began with the Babylonian captivity and continue on to this day. Well, Daniel lived during that first Babylonian empire, so most of his dream was future to him. All he knew about was that first king, that first representation of Babylon. But he experienced what God spoke of through Isaiah 42:9. Somebody has Isaiah 42:9.
Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things are now declared. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them.
So that prophecy is fulfilled here in Daniel, where those things are being revealed to Daniel, these future things. Well, verse 18 gives us the good news that the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there was a stone that was cut without human hands, and it crushed that statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. And then that stone grew into a mountain that filled the whole earth, if you recall that from chapter 2. Here in Daniel's dream, we're introduced to the Son of Man, who will come and receive the kingdom. So now we're getting more specific revelation than what Nebuchadnezzar saw. Now the angel gives us some more details about this fifth ultimate kingdom that's coming. Not only will the Son of Man be given dominion, but the saints will also receive and possess the kingdom. Some conservative commentators have said that Daniel's understanding of saints would have been the faithful Old Testament saints. I think we can read this a little more broadly, though, and say that it's saints of all ages. And Paul suggests this, and John does too. Let's read what Paul said. 2 Timothy 2:11 and 12. Paul refers to this.
The saying is trustworthy, that we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us.
So the promise of reigning with Christ there. And then John spoke of this also in Revelation 2:25 to 29.
Only hold fast what you have until I come. The one who conquers, who keeps my works, until the end. To him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, as with earthen pots are broken in pieces. Even as I myself have received authority from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. And he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
What a glorious promise this is. The kingdoms of men are dominated by evil men and their power-hungry, self-glorifying ways. The eternal kingdom will be ruled by a righteous, holy God. And this great God invites us to participate in this kingdom. We will be given positions of authority in the earthly millennial kingdom and enjoy eternity with him when he creates a new heaven and a new earth. This promise of a future and a hope should be an encouragement to us as we go through our lives, even though we have a hard time picturing it and understanding it. Well, let me put out a question here. We've talked about this a couple of times. We're going to kind of continue it as we go through this section on prophecy. As we think about these promises here of inheriting this eternal kingdom and even having positions of authority there, how does that promise of inheriting that kingdom inspire us right now in the middle of a busy week? How should that affect us now?
It's a great reminder to not dwell on the affairs of today, but to look up.
Also to not worry so much about my own kingdom, building my own kingdom as if what I'm building here now is going to be eternal unless it's for Christ and his kingdom.
Yeah.
But get very caught up on I'm going to build this silo and this barn, and then well, it says before your life's going to be required of you tonight. Yeah, I'm just building sandcastles for now.
Yeah.
I would also say generally this whole anxiety, because you're gonna think more optimistically about the future. Society wants.
There's hope. Yeah.
All these weird things happening, they will come to an end.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be pessimistic about humanity's future.
I think we champion kind of the monetary portion of survival, and always are looking to like how do we make a living, and actually that putting God before that, like you said, help alleviate a lot of that, because it's not like you're buying equity in for it's a finite future, but you buy equity in the kingdom.
Yeah.
That's forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think we forget that easily.
Yeah.
On our day-to-day, it's like, oh, I got a 401k, that's property here and there, and it's like, at the end of the day, it's futile, right? It's really inconsequential.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Verse 19, we see that Daniel can't get this fourth beast out of his thoughts. It's really affected him. He had a hard time describing the first three beasts, but he could at least liken them to something he knew. For example, one beast looked like a leopard, but it had 4 wings. But this fourth beast is so different, it's so hideous, that Daniel does not even attempt to compare it to something that he knows or has seen here on earth. It was so dreadful, so violent, so powerful, that he did not know what to make of it. The 10 horns on the beast also confused him. What could they mean? And then Daniel takes particular note of the little horn that rises up, overcomes 3 horns, and speaks bold and boastful things. Well, we can understand Daniel's distress and curiosity having seen this. In verse 21, we see that Daniel is still looking. He still wants to understand all that is before his eyes. Note that the dream has not stopped during this time. Daniel's not looking back at a vision that ended. No, it's unfolding in real time before his eyes. He sees the little horn with the loud mouth, and it seems to have grown larger. He is greater than all of these other horns or kings around him. He then was making war against the saints. This boastful horn was prevailing over the saints for a time. That came to an end when the Ancient of Days came. At that point, the reign of the horn and earthly kingdoms comes to an end. Judgment was given, and the saints possess the kingdom. Daniel is seeing a compressed presentation of what's to come, what is yet future to us as well. Well, Daniel's angelic interpreter responds to Daniel's questions beginning in verse 23. He tells him that the fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will be different from all the other kingdoms. It would tread down and devour the whole earth. As with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there was a near-term fulfillment with the Roman Empire. It was a powerful, expansive, and it ruled for a long time. There also will be a greater long-term fulfillment in the form of a revived Roman Empire that will appear in the latter days. While the Roman Empire was extensive, we cannot say that it devoured the whole earth as this new Roman Empire will. Well, here's a map of the Roman Empire, and this was the greatest extent of the Roman Empire that occurred under the Emperor Trajan in 117 AD, and you can see it goes across out from Judah out into the Middle East, into Iraq and parts of Iran, down into Egypt and below, and then over to Spain and up to England as far as Hadrian's Wall. So it was what is referred to as the known world. There was obviously more going on in other parts of the world, but this is has been a lot of the focal point. So that was the extent of the Roman Empire, but the revived Roman Empire will be even greater than that. So the revived empire will devour the earth. It will have power to overcome the whole earth, it says. And John spoke of this worldwide power of the beast in Revelation 13, 7 through 8.
Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain.
So what John sees in the Revelation in his vision is expanding upon what Daniel sees here. Well, then in verse 24, the angel explains that the 10 horns represent 10 kings that will arise in that day. This is the second time that God has given us this prophecy. Remember, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there were 10 toes of iron mixed with clay. Some have attempted to say that all this is happening in the past, and the 10 horns represented 10 divisions of the Roman Empire after it collapsed. But then they've got to figure out a way to explain that somehow there were 12 or 15 historical divisions, but some of them didn't count, and somehow they represented 10 kings, and it all gets muddled. Now, the best way to understand this is that this is a future telling of what's coming ahead. When people reject a literal interpretation of Scripture, they get into a lot of crazy gymnastics, and we've seen some of that happen. We haven't seen anything in history that's like what we're reading about here. We know that this beast is yet future. We've also seen people in more recent times draw some premature conclusions. For example, as a result of the Treaty of Rome in 1957, there were 6 nations that formed the European Common Market. Well, then they added members over the years, and then finally in 1981, Greece joined, and Greece became the 10th nation. And some people saw this as the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. But as we now know, this coalition continues to grow, and today there are 27 member nations in the European Union. So even though we can't point to today's European Union as Daniel's fourth beast, we can see how such a thing can come about, how this coalition could arise. We have seen God's prophecy of previous kingdoms come true, so we believe by faith that this last 10-king empire will also arise. So it is Isaiah 46, 9 and 10.
Remember the former things of old, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose.
So there will be a revived Roman Empire consisting of a 10-unit division. It will exist for some unspecified period of time, and then an 11th ruler, the little horn, will rise to power from within that empire. He's a boastful, described as a boastful little horn. He's going to be different from the other kings. He's going to grow in stature and power and prestige to be greater than the other kings. And in fact, he will overthrow 3 of them and thereby gain control and authority over the empire. Now, the New Testament does not give us any details about the earthly career of this person, but clearly identifies him as the Antichrist. He is opposed to Christ. He will have some powers and perform signs that will cause many to follow him. Jews who are still looking to the coming of Messiah at that time will look to him and see wonders and be deceived. Gentiles will likewise be impressed and follow him. Only believers at that time will be able to see through the sham of this Antichrist. And we've seen a lot of predictions over the years of who the Antichrist is, and they've all failed so far, so we want to be cautious and try to name and point that. But I think when he comes, it's going to be obvious, not immediately, but in time. Well, verse 25 says, the Antichrist will speak words against the Most High. Paul described it this way in 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4.
Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God.
So Paul identifies him as that man of lawlessness and describes some of the things that he will do. In Revelation 13, John speaks of the power and the influence of the Antichrist. Revelation 13, 5 and 6.
And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven.
So again, some additional description about this little horn, this Antichrist. The angel interpreter tells us in verse 25 that the Antichrist will target the saints. The translation is that he will wear out the saints. The Aramaic word used here means to wear out as friction wears clothes or sandals. A related Hebrew word is used in Deuteronomy 8:4.
Your clothing did not wear out on you, and your foot did not swell these 40 years.
Okay, same kind of idea there. And then it's used again in Joshua 9:13, but in a little different way.
These wineskins were new when we filled them, and behold, they have clothes, and these garments and sandals, the Lord has worn out from the very long journey.
Yeah, they didn't wear out. So, but it's that same kind of idea, that gradual grinding and wearing down. So he will wear out the saints by trying to change the times and the laws. We can't say for sure what this means, whether he'll try to alter the calendar or the clock, but there's an interesting lesson from history along this line. The French Revolution deposed King Louis XVI, and they formed the first French Republic. The new government implemented a change to the calendar. It was called the Revolutionary Calendar, and they replaced the Gregorian calendar. Well, in that new calendar, each week had 10 days, and each day had 10 hours. Each hour had 100 minutes, and each minute had 100 seconds. Okay? They changed the names of the months and the days. The 10th day was proclaimed the day of rest. Christian holidays were replaced with revolutionary holidays. And this was all part of their effort to replace all Christian influence in society with reason and secularization. Well, as you can imagine, it was a dismal failure. They were able to power through it for 12 years, And then Napoleon came to power and he changed the calendar back to the Gregorian calendar and set things back. Well, I share this with you just to imagine that we often think about a more direct assault that's going to happen to the saints, and that could be, but there's also going to be this kind of wearing down. I think the Antichrist is going to try to attack every aspect of life, and you can just imagine trying to live in that kind of a calendar, you know, and having every 10th day as a day to rest rather than every 7th day. It's just upsetting the natural order that God's put in place. Well, changing the law suggests an assault on the moral law. And we see later in Daniel that he will put an end to the sacrifice in the temple. Somebody has Daniel 9:27.
And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for 1/2 of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator.
So Daniel's going to have another vision later on, and we're going to get some more details there. But there he tells us that this changing of the moral law, in this case disrupting the temple. He will be attacking God's law and the moral foundations of society. We read in verse 21 that he makes war with the saints. He'll make an all-out assault on the lives of the saints by changing times and laws in an attempt to wear them out. And as I said before, we sometimes envision that there's going to be maybe like some kind of a secret police out attacking Christians. Well, that could be the case, but here we see that it's beyond that. It's also beating us down in other ways. The Christians that remain at that time, they'll have to deal with all these ungodly changes in every aspect of their lives. So we might get a small taste of this today as we see things that are immoral become societal norms and enshrined in our laws in some cases, but it'll be much greater in the Great Tribulation day. Well, then we see that he's going to be successful for some period of time. The saints will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a times. And here this is a reflection of a number of years. So years, and half a year. So you add that up, that's 3.5 years. We're going to see more about this as we go through these prophecies in Daniel. But there's a 3.5 year period where this Antichrist is just wreaking havoc on the earth. John refers to the same period of time in terms of days and months. Somebody has that. Let's read first Revelation 12:6.
Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God, so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days.
And then we get a similar thing back up in Revelation 11, verse 2.
But do not measure the court outside the temple, is that right? Leave it out, for it's given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months.
Okay, so there's this 3.5 year period again relating to what we're reading about here in Daniel. This is the last half of the 7-year tribulation period. It's referred to as the Great Tribulation. It's important to note that he's given dominion for a specified period of time. God is still sovereign over kings and over history. He's in control even during this last horrendous time on earth. Verse 26, we see the courts in session. The Ancient of Days takes his seat at judgment. As we saw last week, fire flowed from his throne. Judgment will be passed on the Antichrist, and dominion will be taken from him. He will be utterly destroyed, or as it says, destroyed to the end. This is the stone in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, striking the statue on the feet of iron and clay and crushing it into a fine powder. Well, the kingdom and dominion that was granted to the little horn will be taken away from him and given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Paul echoes this when he calls us co-heirs. Someone has Romans 8:16-18.
The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us.
The kingdom of the Son of Man will be an everlasting kingdom. All will serve him in this new kingdom. John tells us about this in Revelation 19, 1 through 5.
After this, I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven, crying out, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for his judgments are true and just. For he has judged the great prostitute who corrupted the earth with her immorality, and has avenged on her the blood of his servants. Once more they cried out, Hallelujah! The smoke from her goes up forever and ever. And the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures fell down and worshipped God, who was seated on the throne, saying, Amen, Hallelujah. And from the throne came a voice saying, Praise our God, all you his servants, who fear him, small and great.
So the earthly kingdoms and all their earthly grandeur and earthly glory come to an end and are replaced by the kingdom of God. Well, on this victorious note, Daniel's dream ended. The angelic interpreter helped him understand the dream a little better, but he was still alarmed. His color changed, or the New American Standard reads, my face grew pale. Well, we've seen this reaction before to some disturbing dreams about the future. Remember when Belshazzar was the feast, when he saw the handwriting on the wall, he became pale and his knees were knocking and maybe other things were happening to him as well. Well, Daniel keeps all this in his heart. He's still meditating and praying about all that he saw and what the angel said. What he doesn't understand, he accepts by faith. This is a good example for us as we continue to study these prophecies. Well, this ends the Aramaic section of the book of Daniel. Remember we said beginning in chapter 2, chapter 1 was in Hebrew, chapter 2, about verse 4, it flipped to Aramaic. This ends the Aramaic, and now in chapter 8, he's going to go back to Hebrew again. So this Aramaic section has dealt with the times of the Gentiles and from a Gentile perspective. God has his own plan as it relates to the Gentiles. Now Daniel is going to receive a series of 3 visions in the coming chapters, which relate to God's plan relating to his chosen people, the nation of Israel. Well, then I got a couple of pieces of art for you tonight. I don't think we got to these last time I was here, so. This is from the Orthodox Church, and here it's the Ancient of Days, but interestingly, they pictured Jesus as the Ancient of Days. And we talked about how there was a Trinitarian reference. I think last time we mentioned that, as we read about that dream in Daniel, the Trinitarian reference there to the Ancient of Days and the judge, and that Jesus is also going to judge. And then we've featured some Albrecht Dürer work before. Here's the vision of the 7 candlesticks. So this is more related to the apocalypse of John, the Revelation, but it is kind of that heavenly scene that we're touching on here in Daniel as well. So that's kind of his vision of the throne, and Jesus has the stars in his hands. And then one final one. This is a more modern rendition. We read about earlier in Daniel 7, there was this throne and it had wheels of fire. And so this is somebody's, it kind of makes it look like a wheelchair, which seems a little weird. But that was somebody's idea to make the chair have wheels on it, wheels of fire. So that's a more modern interpretation. Okay, so let's do a little application then. What did we see about God in our passage tonight?
Well, perhaps the saints will not be able to overcome these adversities. God will intervene again. Things like
I think when you look at the story, it seems like you get stripped down to where where you almost think, you know, like you said, it's like saints get worn out, and he's just wants you to be faithful all the way to the end, even though it looks dark and bleak, but that ultimately his power and dominion is emphatic. And even I think like it's one of those stories where you think, oh, it may not be all good at the end, and of course it is, but you have to have faith. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's like that's the part of the plan, is that it doesn't look all good and it looks bleak, but to see who has the faith to the end. At least that's how I interpret it.
That kind of reminds me of this prison experiment when people were, actors were sent in prison and the other group was the overseers. And they were like overreaching eventually. But then the experiment ended. Everything was set, like, they kind of saw themselves from inside and how they degraded.
Yeah, the prison experiment where the guards, like regular people were guards and prisoners.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they were horrified at themselves, they saw themselves.
Yeah.
Right, is that that?
Yeah.
Well, what does this passage teach us about the world in which we live?
I think that maybe we don't need to worry about the powerful kingdoms of this world that seem so, that cause us worry and anxiety now, but that we know that God will crash under his final kingdom. So maybe it gives us a little bit of peace as we read news headlines and things like that about around the world, other wars.
Yeah.
There's like it's an ancient tactic by Satan in the sense that he's always had the same kind of deceptions and using the nations of the world and assaulting creation order, just in every culture throughout time. I think Satan's been working. I don't know that he's substantially going to change things up, here at the end of days, which means though that we can see patterns of how Satan's operated in the nations and not fret and freak out. I think, like you were saying, there's kind of the wearing out of the saints, secularizing or de-Christianizing the culture. I think you're making some reference to normalizing, things that are ungodly kinds of behaviors or ungodly principles. That's an ancient tactic. I mean, it's happened before. It'll happen again. It's going to happen in some more emphatic way or a worldwide way or more concerted way. But on one hand, I don't think we should be surprised if there's a hostility towards godly thinking or godly precept. That doesn't mean that you just throw up your hands and say, oh well, I mean, it's happened before, it's going to happen again, and we just throw up our hands or huddle, get in a holy huddle. I don't think it means we don't speak up on issues like abortion or other issues. Only that we don't need to just be clutching at our pearls and every single time people don't like Christians or assault Christians. And what are we expecting? Unless, I guess there are some eschatologies that lean that way, but as far as who we see generally, it's the same kinds of things. So you buckle in, you gird your loins, you get ready to stand up for the truth, and no compromise on that. Preach the gospel, be found faithful, nothing else to say. It hasn't changed much since the time of Daniel.
Yeah.
One of the things that jumps out at me is Daniel was anxious, and even when the passage ends, he's not settled.
Yeah.
Yeah, God knew that and made provisions so that there was somebody who gave him insight. I think one of the reasons he was anxious is because his perspective is much more what we saw in the statues, glitter and gold and strength and all the metal and all that. where clearly God's perspective is very different. And we should know, we should take comfort in knowing that we can gain God's perspective from His Word. We don't make it up. It's not pretense. It's in His Word.
I was just struck, this is more for the point before this one, but, you know, Daniel got these visions way back when. And it hasn't come true. Some of it has already, as we know, but it hasn't finished yet, after all these years. Not even shortly after Jesus was here. No, it's still going on. And here we are, 2025, still waiting on it to kind of come to completion. But I'm just thinking of what it reminds me about God is, you know, how patient He is, how long-suffering He is. And, you know, He's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And, you know, there's still time. I didn't get there in time for prayer requests, but I just got a text just before I left. A half-sister of a good Christian friend of mine is sort of just flunked off or left Christianity years ago, and I think she had a bad taste in her mouth where it was happening in her life. But anyway, she turned to Buddhism, which she's into kind of heavily now. But she's got, she had cancer, colon cancer. They did surgery, and the surgery went well. But then the recent news is that it's now in her, found in her lymph nodes, so she may have to go through chemotherapy and whatnot, and that whole deal. And I'm just thinking, okay, this might be a short-term end for her, but she's still got time. And God's still been, you know, way merciful to her. He loves her. She's turned her back on him, but He loves her. And He's waiting on her. I don't know if she'll turn to Christ or not, you know, but it just, that's just what reminds me about this. It's just that He's so long-suffering, waiting for us to come to Him.
Well, I'll try to ask this in a different way. We'll keep zeroing in on this idea. You know, how does my eschatology inform my life actions, my pursuits, and my schedule? We talked about. I gave you that list of things that prophecy can awaken in us and can open our eyes to, and so we want to keep coming back to this idea. Yes, it's great that we understand more about prophecy and we learn about these things, but we want it to have an effect on our lives as we go through each day. So any final thoughts on this?
I think we all are pursuing some goal, is to provide for our family. And I think that's the new thing that people champion is independence and, you know, agencies and word, right? And they equate that to monetary freedom. And I think that the more I'm in the Word and the less theology, the more it kind of falls to the wayside, especially amongst friends that are still kind of in that fight, that are really still chasing and pursuing, you know, career advancement and trying to up the ante incrementally or big movements and championing that over everything, like the sacrifice of their own family and belligerently saying, well, that's what I want. When it's right there in your face that maybe that's not the best decision, and you've been shown that way, and people still go down that road. You know, whether it be for health or the detriment of your family's health or just your sanity. And I think we all the word, or else you probably understand it. It's easy to drink the Kool-Aid and keep on motoring. Our life and time here is short. I mean, if anything, that's what, I lost a couple of friends recently, and it's just odd. Like, you don't register that on a day-to-day when you should be. And when you're in the Word, it's a pretty easy decision. Put God first, or put the Word first.
Okay. Last chance. All right, let me close tonight and we'll wrap it up.